You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Bupp has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Bupp.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Our guest for this week's show is commercial real estate expert, Brian Hennessy. Now, Brian's been in the commercial real estate industry for 33 years, a commercial broker for 24 of those years, senior vice president of acquisitions and dispositions for a major investor for 6 years, and actually ran his own real estate syndication asset management company for 3 of those years. So to date, he has over 12 million square feet of sale and lease transactions underneath his. Now, during this time, he has represented a number of Fortune 500 tenants, including Bank of America, the Walt Disney Company, and Baxter Healthcare. In addition to his real estate endeavors, Brian is also an accomplished educator and best-selling author. His 2 books, the Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate and the How to Add Value Handbook for Commercial Real Estate, can be found on Amazon, as well as in audiobook format on audible.com and iTunes. Lastly, Brian recently released a commercial real estate due diligence educational program. And at the end of the show today, he's going to share a special offer with you guys, but you have to wait until the very end to hear about it. So make sure you tune into the very end so you don't miss it. Now, before we get on to the show with Brian, I've got a few quick updates I want to run through with you guys. I know you've been hearing me talk about it for the last couple of months, but we literally are days away from opening the second mobile home park fund offering here. It's literally just a few days away. We had a fund that we offered last year, Reg D 506C offering, and we closed that out this past March, and we've been working on launching the second fund here. And again, we're just days away. And I know you guys hear me talk about it a lot, but I like to reiterate that we're very much different from a lot of the other offerings that are out there. In fact, the reason why that is that we're really good at finding great deals, even in the very challenging marketplace that we find ourselves in today. We don't rely on just brokers to bring us deals, and nothing against brokers. I know where Brian was a broker for many years, so there's nothing against brokers here, but I tell you that we find off-market deals by direct means ourselves. So we don't just rely on one avenue to find these deals when there's a big competitive market out there chomping for the same opportunities. And so we pride ourselves on that. We currently have 8 mobile home parks in contract right now, and so these are going to be rolling into that second mobile home park fund. And I know there was a number of you that kind of missed out on the first opportunity, and it got filled up pretty quickly. Subscriptions got filled fairly quickly. And so we want to know that, let you know that this is going to be an opportunity that's here in a couple days. And I can't tell you how long it's going to last, though. We're probably going to fill it pretty quickly. So if you want the first stab at getting into this partnership with us here in the second fund, go to sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. On that website, it's our company website. You can go up to the investors tab, and it will take you to our secure investment portal. There you can actually create a free account, and basically this will put you on the first and no basis. So as soon as it goes live, you'll get the offering documents and get to review it before anyone else does, okay? sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. Next up, guys, we're seeking additional opportunities. Although we've got a pretty massive pipeline, again, 8 parks in contract, a number of them behind that are coming in. We're always looking for more opportunities, okay? If you're out there on the hunt, whether you're in commercial real estate or residential, it doesn't really matter, but as you're out there hunting for that opportunity, if you come across a mobile home park that seems like it could fit the bill, and what that means to us is 60 spaces or larger and an MSA that has at least 100,000 population, okay? There's other factors we look for, but those are kind of the 2 main criteria. If you have something that seems decent and maybe you're looking to take it down, but you don't have the track record or capital to do it, we can help you there. Or maybe you're just looking to flip it for a profit, we can also help you there. So if you have an opportunity, email me directly, Kevin@kevinbupp.com. We can handle deals upwards of $25 million. We can handle portfolio deals. It doesn't just have to be one-off purchases, okay? We pay incredibly high finder's fees, and I'd really love the opportunity to put one of those big finder fees checks in your pocket. Now, guys, without further ado, I'd like to get on to the guest for today's show, Brian Hennessy. Brian, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for joining me. And just to give our listeners a sense of geography, where are you joining us from today?
Burbank, California.
Burbank. All righty. And we were talking a little bit about, I believe you said you've been out in California since you were about 10 years old. And you first, I guess your feet landed in, was it Santa Monica? Was that correct?
Santa Monica was the sleepy little beach town we landed in. It's no longer a sleepy little beach town.
Yeah, right.
But it was pretty quiet place growing up there. So
okay, well, very cool. Well, I want to know about your background and a little bit more of who you are, Brian. And I gave you a very brief introduction there, but I'm sure that's piddly compared to what it really looks like. And so maybe if you would take a few minutes, tell our listeners a little more about yourself, your background, and more importantly, how you got involved in commercial real estate.
Well, the first 18 years I was in commercial real estate. I actually started out in residential for a little while, but it never really resonated with me that much. I just found myself always gravitating towards commercial properties, interested in it. There was a couple of commercial brokers in the office I worked, and I was always asking them questions and bringing them stuff and talking about it. And then eventually I went into the commercial real estate end of the biz. And after about 18 years of being a broker, one of my clients asked me to come over and work with him as his vice president of acquisitions and dispositions. Mm-hmm. And I thought that would be an easy slide. I've been doing it for 18 years, and how difficult can it be? I've always wanted to be on the buy side. And then, so I went over to work with him. And what I found out quite quickly was it was very different being a broker. And so what happened was the first couple of transactions that we worked on were a couple large office properties, and they were being sold by a Canadian investment firm, and the vice president who was selling it to us quickly surmised that I was a neophyte when it came to buying large office buildings, and took me to school. And I was stressed out of my mind I had all these legal pads on my desk and writing down questions, who I asked what, who owed me what information, what have you. And I couldn't wait for the process to end, because it was just, I'd be laying awake at night, wondering, did I ever get that information? Did that person ever get back to me on that thing? What else was I supposed to ask? What am I missing? So what happened was, about a couple weeks after the close of escrow, I was coming into the office, and one of the people said, "Hey, the investor I work for wanted to talk to me." So I went over to his office, and he said, "Have a seat." And then he closed the door behind him, and after a long silence, he said to me, "I can't believe you missed all this information during these transactions we just did." And so he started to tell me about what that information was. And I really was kind of taken by surprise, because I didn't really realize that I had missed it. And all I could say was, "I'm sorry," and I didn't realize it. And he said, "I think I made a huge mistake hiring you as my acquisition person. I thought you would know all this." And so that night when I went home, I was just I could not sleep. I was sitting there, how could I have missed all this? What could I have done differently? And I decided I was going to create a reference manual for myself that had all the questions and the issues and the checklists and everything. So I didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time that I bought a commercial property. So I began that process, and I did that over a 6-year period. I just compiled every time we did a transaction and a new lesson was learned, I'd put it in my reference manual and started compiling all this information, because we were buying a lot of property all over the U.S. And every market has its own nuances, as you know, and what have you. So, and then I ended up going off on my own and buying 350,000 feet of office properties in Houston and managing those. And so there was a lot of information that I was gathering and learning about. And then, of course, we got slammed by the Great Recession. And in about 2012, I did go back into brokerage, and I didn't know what to differentiating myself to my competition, basically. So what I did is I said, you know what, I'm going to take my reference manual, I'm going to create a handbook out of it, and for investors, and I'll use that as a marketing piece, never expecting anything to happen with it and any copies to sell anything. I just put it up on Amazon. I wouldn't even spend the $150 to format it because I never thought it would sell one copy. And what I found out was it started selling, and I thought, gee, this is interesting. So I said, maybe I should take this a little more seriously. So I had it professionally formatted and had a cover designed, added some stories to it, put it out, and it took off, and it became a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and still in the top 5 or 10 commercial real estate books on Amazon. And I think what that told me was it was a niche of information that was missing out there. So I started doing seminars on it, and I found it very gratifying that people were being helped by it. And to this day, I'm still blown away that people just don't put enough importance on the process of due diligence. And I think that has to do with not so much as they don't care about it. I think they just don't know what they don't know. Yeah. Just like I didn't. And once I found that out, it was like, oh my gosh, because commercial transactions can be very complex, especially compared to residential. So depending upon the type of genre that you're investing in, they can be extremely complex. So there's a lot of variables that could go wrong. So I call this the belt and suspenders approach to investing in real estate. And I tell people when they say, well, why do you need to know all this? And I tell them, having and adhering to a proven system when you're conducting due diligence allows you to do it faster, easier, more efficiently, and you're less likely to miss something.
No, absolutely. In fact, I want to talk to you a little bit about those first couple of transactions that you closed when you were working for that investor, when he brought you into his office and was basically going to reprimand you about all the items that you missed. What were some of those items? Do you recall some of what he felt to be important items that were missed by you?
Yeah, I think I can remember some of them. I mean, like tenant financials.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, not everybody gives you financials. So, I mean, you just kind of, we bought portfolios of properties. We bought a 1.8 million square foot portfolio from Equity Office Properties, which is Sam Zell. And then we bought a 2.2 million square foot portfolio from Transwestern, 4 buildings in Chicago and 3 in Dallas. And there's a lot of tenants in those buildings.
Sure.
So you're picking and choosing, and it was always the same 30-day due diligence, 30-day close. So you had to be on your A game. And so there were, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I just remember some of them were missing, like lease commencement letters and various documentations and things that I just didn't know. I mean, trying to keep track of. So I had to develop how do I keep track of this? How do I make sure that I'm not letting anything drop through the cracks? Because some sellers are very adept at putting you off, especially that people say to me, well, yeah, but you were buying from some big institutional sellers. I go, yeah. And those are the professional ones at it. Sure. They know every trick in the book. So I learned a lot of lessons from buying properties from those guys.
Yeah. I mean, I like to say that to me, the ultimate purpose of due diligence is to enable the buyer to essentially discover as much as possible about that property before you're obligated to buy it, right? Or before your money goes hard.
Absolutely.
And this can include discovering information this is more importantly, discovering information that the seller may not want you to know, or perhaps maybe information that the seller's not even aware of, right? Potential issues.
Well, that's true. I don't want to give the impression that every seller that you're going to deal with out there is looking to get you, but but you're right. It's what happens is, I tell people, hey, the seller doesn't come to you and say, here's a list of issues and problems you should be aware of when you're buying this property. Okay, what they're happening, they'll give you the bare minimum material facts, but they're hoping you don't find any issues and you get the deal closed,
So I'm a very trusting individual. I like to say that I will trust everyone until I'm given a reason not to trust them. This is on a personal level, but it's quite different when we're buying property. I always go into it, even if we're dealing directly with the seller or if there's a broker involved, it doesn't really matter. If I feel very comfortable with all parties involved, I still go in assuming that there's some things that I'm not being told. Maybe not on purpose. Maybe they're not purposely trying to keep information, but I always go into the deal just knowing that there's some unknowns here. Maybe they don't even know they are, or there's items that they do know and they're aware of that they might not want me to find out about. And so I kind of go in with that Inspector Gadget hat on and just let's really dig deep and pull back all the layers and not worry about trusting everyone on the front end. Let's just see what we've got at hand and dig through all the facts that are available. So
absolutely. Yeah, I'll tell you something. It pays huge dividends to learn this stuff. And I've had many a seller come to me and say, you know what, you know more about this property than I do. And I would say that's because I, interviewed your tenants. I went through all this stuff, and some of these people, the tenants had been there longer than the owners had owned it, and they tell you all sorts of stuff. So it's just there's a lot of different avenues to go down to discover this stuff. And I tell people, once you know what you're doing and you have a system in place, it makes it a lot easier. You're a lot more calm and confident about getting it done. And those people that aren't, let's say, professionals that do this as their daily business, right? They're doing this as a side thing. They work their job or whatever their work is, and then they're buying this property, apartments, building, whatever it is on the side. There's a lot of stuff to go through. And so by the time they get to the end of the due diligence period or the end of the escrow, they're drained. Physically, mentally, they're just spent and they just want to get it over with. And that's just the time you really need to tap the brakes and say, okay, slow down. Let's reassess here. Did we get everything we're looking for? And how do you go about doing that? If you have a system in place, it makes it a lot easier to do.
Yep. So that kind of leads me to my next question. What are some of the areas where you see investors or buyers make the biggest mistakes, or maybe even purposely cut corners with the due diligence process? I'm sure there's a few just big ones that stick out in your mind as you've watched many buyers go through this process.
I can go through some of the top ones that I see.
Yeah, please do.
One of the mistakes I see a lot of buyers making is they're not valuing the property correctly. Mm-hmm. Just because they have an agreed upon purchase and sale agreement with the seller, that doesn't mean that's what the property's worth. And that's part of the process of doing due diligence. It's really prepping you. If you're doing your due diligence properly, it's not only minimizing your risk, it's optimizing your value, because you make your money on the buy, you realize the value on the sell. Right. Mm-hmm. So what happens is you're going through your due diligence and you find out, whoa, wait a second, I didn't know that it needed this. And wow, this is going to need redoing. And I've got plenty of stories to tell you about that. And so what happens is you're much more prepared if you've done a proper job of conducting your due diligence to go back to the seller and state, hey, and you do this in a formalized manner by putting it in an email or whatever the case may be, usually in an email, and saying, we've done this, and this. We've gotten bids on this, and this. And we did not factor these in when we originally underwrote the property. However, we're willing to go forward and remove all our contingencies if we can get X amount discounted off the price. That's much more palatable to a seller than just saying, hey, there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done, therefore I want $50,000 knocked off the price. Mm-hmm. Right? And I tell people, look, you've got to have a walkaway position. At least, the worst can happen is they can say, I'm not going to give you a 50, but I'll give you a 30. And then you end up negotiating and you make a deal with them. You don't do it unless you're ready to remove all your contingencies, right? Mm-hmm. And then I would say that have a walkway position. Just what's happened to me many times is I said, look, if we can't come to an agreement here, I'm canceling the escrow. And the seller would go ahead, cancel the escrow. Cancel the escrow. 3 days later, I get the broker calling me back. Hey, listen, they really would like to try to work something out with you here. Can we talk about this? Sometimes we ended up making a deal. Sometimes they never came back. But I always tell people, sometimes the best deals you make are the ones you don't do.
Absolutely.
Right?
You've always got to be willing to walk away. It's tough once you got a lot of time and emotional energy.
Yeah.
In the process. It's very challenging, but you have to be willing to walk away. And it really comes down to sometimes it's a game of poker, right? I mean, who's going to call whose bluff, and sometimes there's not a bluff. Sometimes it is what it is. And you got to be willing to truly stand up and walk away from the deal. If you've got your heart set on either getting a price reduction due to these items that you found during due diligence, or you're going to kill it, or you got to be willing to go into it with a black and white policy. At least that's what we do. So
yeah, look, I've actually had the sellers come back or their broker months later.
Yeah.
And say, you know what? It was an escrow. It fell out. Are you still interested? Yeah, but not at the price I was talking about.
Yep. Well, I think what happens in those scenarios is you might have been the first buyer in, and the seller looks at it as though like you're beating them up. Oh, you're finding all these items, just trying to retrade. This was your intent the entire time, and so they take you get out of escrow. They go find another buyer. This new buyer, basically discovers all these items, these issues, these concerns that you found, and then does the same thing, attempts to go retrade. The whole deal falls apart, and then the seller's sitting there wondering, well, maybe all these other buyers are right because we've literally had 2 or 3 deals fall apart. Maybe we should go back to Brian, since he seemed like he had the wherewithal to get this done and seemed, the most professional in that nature. And we should go back to him and let's just drop the price a little bit.
Yep. Absolutely. So I tell people,
setting expectations,
learning how to do this stuff, it really puts you in a much better position to be to make calm, confident, self-assured decisions, whether to move forward or not. I mean, I've gone through the whole thing and then basically assessed all of my due diligence, said, you know what? I'm just not convinced that this is all that great a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I could get a discount, I may not take it just based on some of the findings I got into when I was doing my due diligence. So that's not valuing the property. That's a biggie. A lot of people get themselves, and then they think they're backed into the corner. No, you're not backed into the corner. Not unless your money goes hard, then it's a little more difficult to walk away. The other thing I see and correlates with that is not understanding the lender's underwriting requirements. Mm-hmm. I tell people, look, before you start spending a bunch of time, money, and energy on your due diligence, call up a lender. Make sure that what you're thinking is what they're thinking. And what happens, I see people just go into it, now I'm going to get an 80% loan on this or whatever, and then they get in there and it's like, no. We can't do that on that property, and it's like, well, now you just wasted a bunch of time and energy on something you can't get the loan that you want to get on it, So just call them up. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to give them the exact address, but you can give them the parameters of it. And, is this something that you can do, make a loan on at these kind of terms? And well, what kind of terms can you do? Right.
You should be doing that ahead of time anyway. I mean, if you're going to focus on a particular niche, whether it's office properties or apartment complexes, I mean, you really, before you even buy your first one, you should be establishing those lender relationships and having some of those discussions.
Wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah, underwrite it properly.
A lot of people just think it's all going to work out, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Another one I see is they don't go down and they don't check out the municipal codes and see if there's any violations against the property or any forthcoming compliance requirements coming up that might be triggered when you buy this property. Mm-hmm. That's an easy one, and a lot of people just don't check it out. They just kind of leave it as after the fact, and it's like, whoa, I didn't know if I redid the restrooms and some of the common areas. I was going to have to, bring them all up to ADA compliance, and that's going to cost me another $75,000, $100,000. Like I wasn't counting on that. Well, maybe if you went down there ahead of time, you would have been aware of that.
Now, who would you talk to? What? Go
to the building department, building planning, and just say, I'm in escrow with this property. Can you tell me if there's any outstanding code violations or anything coming up that I should be aware of that might affect the property? That type of thing.
Got it.
Sometimes you'll be surprised as to what they come up with. Is like, oh yeah, there's fire sprinklers you have to be put in there, and in this time frame or whatever. So. Another one, assuming there's no issues with the existing leases. I mean, I'm always amazed that, you need to go through these leases and understand what's in there, because there can be some major issues with them that are going to affect the value of the property, not only now, but for in the future too. So you want to be aware of that. What if they have a fixed option rent that's plugged in there and it's low and it's below market and they're already at a below market rent, and then there's all sorts of other issues like they get a refurbishment allowance of $15 or $20 a foot, or that when they renew, and it's like you want a credit on these things. That's what I tell people. Make sure that you have the ability to go back and get a credit from the seller. I'll tell you a quick little story. I was buying a fairly large office building in Phoenix from a lender. It was an REO property, real estate owned. They had taken it back, and we got under contract, and they flew their attorney out from New York to negotiate with us. And when it came time for closing, we're going through the preliminary closing statement, and I see this giant number as a debit against us, and I was like, what's this? It's $450,000 of was it leasing, tenant improvements and commissions and a bunch of stuff. And I said to the seller's rep, I said, wait, this is wrong. This is a credit towards us, not a debit. And he goes, no, we would never agree to anything like that. I said, well, your attorney flew out here and negotiated the deal, and look at this paragraph in the purchase and sale agreement. He says, I'll call you back in a little bit. Half hour later, he called me back and said, you know what? You're right. I don't know why we would ever have agreed to that. But it was a big number. So the point is, make sure you have these things, that you're scrutinizing your leases and you know what is in there that could come back to haunt you later, and make sure you're getting a credit for those.
Yep. No, that's great advice. I mean, that might not be all that applicable to maybe a multifamily property, but pretty much any type of commercial real estate it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that, the other thing I tell people to do is, if you're going for a loan and they require some third-party reports like a physical condition assessment or an environmental report or some other special report, depending upon where the property is and what the issues are, make sure you get the people that are doing the reports that are on the lender's approved list. Because if you don't, they can make you do it over again. And that's happened to me, and it's an expensive lesson. So what I tell people is just run it by them. Hey, I'm going to do the physical condition assessment report or the environmental report. Here's who I'm using. Or is this okay? Are you guys good with this? Get it in an email, right? And they'll say, yeah, that's fine. Or no, that they're not on our list. Okay, can you send me your list over? Sometimes I just ask for the list. So give me your list, and I'll pick somebody off of that.
Got it. Now, I want to ask you on the flip side of that. So these are things that buyers could be cutting corners on during this due diligence process. But on the flip side, what are some of the sneaker things that you've seen sellers try to hide from the buyers? I'm sure the list is probably just as long, but
I was trying to buy a 150 unit complex, multifamily complex in Golden, Colorado. And, what happened was I was only there for a day or two, and I was trying to put the deal together. I asked the broker, I said, hey, look, would it be okay while we're negotiating this purchase and sale agreement if I get the contractors in there to start the inspection process when we're over there talking to your leasing person. And he goes, I don't know if the seller's going to. I said, just ask him. And the seller said, no way. I don't even know if we have a deal yet. And I go, look, I'll give you whatever insurance bonds, whatever you need to make yourself comfortable. I'm only going to be here for another day, and I need to get this done. And do you really want to spend a bunch of money on legal fees if we have a deal that we can't get issues resolved on? And he finally said, okay, fine. So I met their leasing representatives over there with a bunch of contractors, an inspector he had a bunch of guys that came with him. They were crawling all over this place. And when I was in the meeting with the property management people, he came in and asked if he could talk to me privately. And I said, sure. So I stepped out and he said, look, there's some issues here that they're trying to hide. And I said, like what? And he says, well, there's some foundational issues they're covering up with boards and mud. And he said, come here, I'll show you. And he showed me, and I go, wow. I go, what else did you find? He goes, I haven't even finished the thing. I said, well, do me a favor. I got to leave in about an hour or so, but call me when you're finished and let me know what you found. And he did. I was at the airport and he called me and he said, okay, I finished and there's a lot of these. And I said, well, talk to me in terms of dollars. And he said, I don't know exactly, but can run anywhere from $1.5 to $3 million to repair all this stuff.
Wow.
And I said, that's all I needed to know. And I just said, okay, deal's off. I'm not moving forward on it. So that's the kind of stuff that you can find out. It could be pretty expensive. And I saved myself the headache of having to go through, the whole process. I just didn't want to. I always say, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Sure.
So just ask. So that's another example. And then trusting that the seller and their representatives are telling you everything, that they're not going to tell you that one of their tenants is getting ready or has claimed bankruptcy, or, you need to go in there. And that's why I really drive home the point that you need to interview the tenants and learn how to do it properly so you can find out. I found out it's the single best source of information you can find on a leased investment, because the tenants will tell you things that you're never going to hear from the seller or the representatives. And if they say, no, you're not, we don't know if we have a deal yet, so you're not interviewing the tenants. And I go, well, what do you got to hide? If you don't have anything to hide, then it shouldn't be a problem.
So is that pretty typical? Let's talk about like an office property. You mentioned some larger properties that you've purchased over the years, or at least have been involved in the purchase of. I mean, some of these properties, I'm assuming, have 50, 100 tenants in them. Maybe not that many, but it's a large number. And during a normal due diligence period, that might be 30, maybe 45 days. Is it realistic to actually have the opportunity to actually interview each and every one of those tenants that are in that property?
No. Like, for instance, like the 4 buildings, 1.8 million square foot building had like 600 tenants in them. And what you do is you end up going to the bigger ones and the ones who have an expiration coming up in the next 12 to 18 months. You want to find out, are they plan on staying, or that type of thing. So you end up really negotiating, the percentage of tenants and which ones, if they're major ones and that type of thing, which you become more adept at as you're doing it, if you're buying those types of properties. But you certainly want to interview the ones that are coming up soon and the bigger tenants, because if they move out, they could, your golden opportunity can turn to lead very quickly. Is it pretty common that during those interviews with some of those larger tenants that have lease terms coming up, that you might be able to get to the point of even making a somewhat of a preliminary offer contingent on the sale going through, meaning that if they're willing to sign, a renewal of these terms? Extension, yeah. No, we have before. Okay, just to kind of prepare yourself. I mean, you've got you've underwritten the property at whatever, the market rents that you're trying to achieve. And so you want to get it. You want to gauge who's going to stay, who's not. I've had them say, no, there's no way, no matter what, we're not going to stay here. We don't need to be in this location anymore, which was a huge indicator to me. And I was like, oh, wow, they're not staying. I need to put that into my underwriting to plan on them moving out. And plug in the tenant improvements, downtime, commissions, the whole 9 yards. So anyway, those are the types of things you're going to find out when you're going through it. Another mistake, they expect the closing statement to be without issues, and I just gave you the one that probably was extreme, but there's tons of them. And I tell people, just like we were talking about earlier, you get to the closing statement and you're spent. You just want the process to be over. You went through your whole appraisal, loan application, due diligence, and now you're at the end and you get your preliminary closing statement, and there's a bunch of debits on your side that they're dinging you for. And this is just the time when you need to tap the brakes and go, wait a minute, what do we got here? I don't understand this number here. I need backup. What's the substantiation on this? The other thing I tell people is get somebody else that knows what they're looking for to check it out and look at it, because after you've seen it 3 or 4 times, all those numbers just start looking the same. They're just jumbling up. So, and it could be your CPA, could be your real estate attorney, could be a property manager that it could be anybody, but that you're confident knows what they're looking at. And then they can say, whoa, why are they dinging you on this? Why is there a $6,000 lease review fee by the lender? I tell people, go back and try to eliminate it. If you can't eliminate it, at least try to reduce it. Say, I'll give you a 2 or 3, but I'm not going to give you 6, And a lot of times you can get those reduced. It's just they slip them in there. And
yeah, they sure do.
Right? So those are the kind of things I'm talking about. But those will pay big dividends if you slow down. A lot of investors just leave big money on the table by not paying attention to that stuff.
I feel like in today's world, we're in a very competitive environment. Again, it doesn't matter what asset class you're in; everyone's chasing yield out there, and obviously that it gives the seller some leverage, typically more leverage than a buyer, as far as like the due diligence time frame that's allowed. And so, what would you say is the safest minimum amount of time? And I know that's always property dependent, size of the property, and the size of your team and how much help you have. But I mean, just generally speaking, how many days of due diligence, and then how many days for a realistic closing time frame?
Well, to me, it's really the size and the scope and the type of the property. I mean, if there's a bunch of leases, or if it's just 1 or 2 tenants, or half a dozen or something, or what if it has environmental issues? You have to build in enough time to get the environmental report back and check it out and make sure that there's no outstanding issues. You don't need a no further action letter issued by the local municipality, or 3 weeks is probably tight. Depends on the property, though. I mean, if you've got all that, that's why it really pays to package your due diligence package when you're going to sell the property, and say, here it all is. I want to shorten it up as much as possible. So give us your best shot.
Yep.
And but other than that, you got to give yourself enough time to get through that stuff, and not only get through it, but be able to try and negotiate if, in fact, there's room to do that, and or pull the plug and say, you know what, I'm just not comfortable with this. I'm going to pass.
You'd mentioned something about environmental. Have you had any deals go sideways due to an environmental issue that was discovered during a phase 1 or phase 2 inspection?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some people that will just pass. They don't want to. If, let's say, they get to the phase 2 and it may state that we recommend that you do this, that, or the other, and it could run anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 or whatever the case may be, and the seller's not willing to budge, or he's only going to give you the $200,000, and then you're going to throw the dice on if it's going to cost more. right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's at that point, it's a matter of what have you got built in? What are you comfortable with? Have you done these types of transactions before? Are you confident that, if it does cost the $400, you're still going to be feeling okay about it? Mm-hmm. What if it's worse? Just so it's all those things. So it can get a little dicey on these things. You just have to be aware of what you're getting into before you get too deep. Once you own it, it's yours. So
it's yours, right? It's your responsibility. No, we just
get everything that comes with the property, including all its problems and issues.
Sure. Yeah, we just killed a deal that finished up with a phase 2 and discovered numerous. We knew that there were a few underground tanks, petroleum tanks. There were actually many more than what we initially had thought, and just got to the point to where risk versus reward. Even though the seller was willing to a certain extent to comply and to fund the project, there was just so much there that they weren't willing to let the number be open ended as far as the amount to remediate it per the contract.
No, it's not, and that's understandable.
Sure, absolutely.
But it's just you've got to be comfortable. If you're not comfortable, then I'd say pass. Just it's not worth it, because otherwise it's just, I always tell people, trust your gut. If your gut's telling you there's a big problem here, and you're just, you're not comfortable with it, there's probably a reason for it, because there's, you don't know and you're not comfortable, you probably shouldn't be going forward on it.
So my thoughts on something like that. So in my mind, at least on that deal, again, it didn't turn out how we were hoping it would turn out. We were willing to move forward. We were okay with the remediation efforts. We have an amazing environmental attorney that we've been working with, and we're very comfortable with the process that was required in order to remediate what was there. It just really came down to not being able to put a firm number on what the final cost is really going to look like. I mean, there were a few $100,000 variance, and it was which was big enough to, if it went the wrong way towards us, then it wouldn't have made the deal as sexy. And so we were willing to step in and do that. But my question is, and how I kind of view these situations, at least with this seller, is, now that these items are out in the open, I mean, it's his legal requirement to essentially disclose this to the next buyer in line. And so, it got to the point where I was wondering to myself, like, what is he going to do with this property? I mean, it's got to be fixed one way or another. And now that it's potentially disclosed, I mean, it's got to be disclosed to every new potential buyer that comes down the line. And so,
did you give him your copy of your phase 2?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he probably handed it to the next.
I don't think there's another buyer in line yet, but I'm just, that's it. He's just being a very stubborn seller, and, it is what it is, but I'm guessing that one might come back to us again. We're willing to work through those challenges.
Yeah, that could very well be the case. So,
yeah. Give me some other very important items that you see buyers. Again, due diligence, it's so vitally important, right? I mean, we make our money on the buy. Right. And so what are some other key items that you see people just miss or flop on as buyers are concerned?
Yeah, no, there's a couple, there's a number of them, actually.
Market research. I mean, there's title issues.
Not checking out here. One of the things is checking out the competition thoroughly. And that, I see a lot of people do a cursory look on that without really understanding it. And depending upon the type of property and where it is and everything, sometimes you should drill much deeper than just a quick few phone calls of some similar properties in the area.
Aren't you supposed to just rely on like the broker marketing package that was given to you?
Well, if you're really, overly optimistic person, I guess you would. Yeah. But what happens is people just don't feel like it's all that important. And what happens is, if you start drilling down and find out, wait a minute, historical occupancy in this area it keeps going down. Why is that? Mm-hmm. There's a reason for that. What's going on? So you start doing more investigation, and you find out either a major employer is moving out or has moved out, or there's a new development not far away that a lot of people are going to. It could be a bunch of stuff. So just do yourself a favor and spend a little more time on that. The other thing I tell people to do, which it's a mistake when they don't do it is spend time at the property. And when I talk about that, what I'm talking about is go there at different times, okay? In the morning, mid-morning, afternoon, nighttime, weekends. Why? Because you're going to see the property operating differently at different times. If it's multifamily and you go there in the evening, you'll see the types of cars that are being that are parked there. If you go there during the day, you may see people hanging out in front, what's going on around there. If it's a weekend and it's a commercial property, maybe the parking lot is a hangout for the local teenagers to party on Saturday evenings and stuff. It's just, there's a bunch of different things that could happen. If it's an office building in an urban area, that might be the washrooms are being used by the homeless people that live in the area. There's a lot of different things that can happen. Okay, so do yourself a favor. Go check it out at different times. I've passed on opportunities because of seeing things around properties that I wasn't comfortable with at different times.
I have as well.
so there, that's the reason I bring that up. And then the other thing I tell people is insist upon walking each and every apartment, unit, suite, whatever the applicable genre it is. You want to make sure you go through all of it. And we talked about the large office portfolio. There were 600 tenant spaces in there. I insisted on walking each and every one of them. And the property manager said, there's way too many. We'll never be able to walk them all. I said, no, we will. And let's get started now. Let's go. And we did. And I did find some stuff. So really important. I'll tell you another story, kind of extreme, but I was buying a 377 room hotel in Dallas from a very well-known hotelier group, international hospitality group, that if I said the name, you would immediately recognize it. And when we were buying it, I was kept insisting I need to walk all the guest rooms, and they said, no, it's much too disruptive. We'll let you walk 20% of them or something like that. And so I was so busy doing the due diligence, and I was interviewing the vendors, and one of the vendors said to me, there's a bunch of rooms in the hotel here that are out of service due to mold issues. And I said,
boy.
No. I said, no, I wasn't aware of that. Do you know how many? He goes, no, but I understand there's quite a few. So I said, okay, well, thanks very much for letting me know. So when he left, I immediately called the seller and I said, look, I just heard you had some mold issues in the hotel, and I want to walk each and every one of these guest rooms. And if you don't let me, I'm canceling escrow today. And he said, okay, fine. So we went and we walked all the rooms, and it turned out there was 55 rooms out of service with mold issues, some of which I refused to step foot in because it was so bad. And we ended up negotiating a $2.5 million discount off the price. Now, could we have gotten that from them, later on? Possibly, after much litigation and attorney's fees and headaches, maybe years it might have been. But instead, we negotiated right there, got the discount, closed the deal, fixed the stuff up, and got it done. So that's an extreme example, but nonetheless, it highlights and underscores the importance of walking all the suites. The other thing I tell people is it's an apartment building, and there's usually on the bigger units, I've gone through, I've seen a couple of the units, there were 100 units plus, and I'd walk through and there'd be one or two units that were smoke damaged or mold issues, and they've taken appliances out of them and things, cannibalized them for other units. And then that means that if you didn't walk those units, you're replacing all that stuff.
Yep. It's a big deal. It adds up once you start talking about hundreds of units.
You're talking big dollars here.
Yep, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, I know we're running out of time, Brian, but I wanted to ask you about first and foremost, your educational program. Now, I know that you wrote both of these books based on your experience in the commercial real estate industry, both as a broker and also working for an investor on the acquisition side and even doing your own syndicate. So tell us a little bit about this recent educational platform that you've released specifically on due diligence.
Okay. What happened was, as I was doing the seminars for the due diligence handbook for commercial real estate, people kept coming up and asking me about do you have some kind of video course that explains these in more detail and gets into the nitty gritty of some of the stuff? And I said, I don't. I've been thinking about doing it, but I just haven't done it yet. And I finally did it. And it's out there now. And it's called the Due Diligence Video Course for Commercial Real Estate. 16 modules. And what you can do is you can check it out. I'm offering your listeners a special discount on the course price, a 25% discount. You have to go to impactcoachingsystems.com/courses. So that's impactcoachingsystems.com/courses. And then when you go to enroll in the course, use this code. It's code CODEKB25. And when you go to enroll, it'll automatically discount the course price by 25%. And what I offer there, Kevin, is it's first of all, you can check it out. There's you can watch a few of the modules free. And I tell people, if you're not totally convinced, you got 30 days to go through it. If you're not totally convinced that it's worth at least 10 times what you paid for it, and I got to tell you, you're going to think it's worth a lot more. I think it's worth 100 times what you paid for it based on the lessons that I had learned and the tips and strategies and tactics and everything that I teach in it. Then just send me an email. No questions asked. I'll refund your money back. No problem. Okay.
Fantastic. So that's code KB25, right? Promo code. Is it actually CODE? Do they have to write that in as well?
Yeah. Okay. Right in there. It'll say discount, coupon, or whatever. Yeah.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. So everyone, go to impactcoachingsystems.com/courses, and you can put in code KB25 and get 25% off.
Also, I was going to say, there's a lot of free forms and information and things that could help you in your commercial real estate investment business that are on my website under the resources tab. Check those out. You'll find them to be really helpful, and I'm happy to, you can have access to all of that.
Now, Brian, is this applicable, your due diligence program, is it applicable to all the different commercial types? I mean, even multifamily. Multifamily it's got some similarities as far as the due diligence process, but there's also some vast differences as well. Will this program be helpful to those that are interested in office, retail, industrial, and also multifamily?
All of them. And
okay.
I tell people the fundamentals are the same. I actually cover some aspects on some of the different genres as well. But, for the most part, you're using the same process and systems. You're changing up questions, obviously. You're not going to be talking about retail questions to an office seller, right? But you just change them up. But I've got all of the information in there that makes it quite easy to be able to interchange that information. And basically, by the time you get through with the course, you are feeling much more self-assured and confident about dealing with any kind of seller on any kind of property.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, I appreciate that, Brian. And I'd like to enter into what I like to call the golden nugget segment of the show now. This is where we're going to kind of wrap things up for the day. And you've shared a lot of golden nuggets already, but if you got just one last one left, what would the last final golden nugget advice or wisdom be that you could leave with the listeners today that may inspire and motivate them as they progress in their real estate investing career? What would that one last final golden nugget be?
Well, I would say the one thing I always leave my seminar students with is assume nothing. If you're going to assume anything, you want to assume that there's problems and issues that need to be discovered. And once you learn this, it's like riding a bike. It just gets each transaction, it gets a little easier and a little quicker, and you just get better and better at it as you're doing it until it's second nature to you. And what happens is once the seller or brokers know that you know what you're doing, they're much less likely to play games with you.
Yeah. Yep, very true. Very true. In fact, a lot of times it's a test for them, right? They don't want to waste their time either. They want to deal with an educated buyer on that side. They don't want to be burning up their time and their energy when they could have a much more viable buyer at hand, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So it goes both ways. Well, fantastic, Brian. This has been a lot of fun, and really appreciate you coming on the show and speaking with us today. And for those that want to go check out again his website and his educational resources that he offers there, including his due diligence video training system, as well as a couple books that he offers. I'm assuming you have links to your books, right, Brian?
I think I have links on the website if they want to check out the books. And
okay. Got it. His website, again, is impactcoachingsystems.com. And Brian, is that the best way to reach you as well? If someone had a question for you directly.
You know what? I tell people, feel free to send me questions, or my best way to reach me by email is Brian, BRIAN, at impactcoachingsystems.com.
Okay.
And then feel free to call me if I'm available and I got the time. I'm happy to talk to people, and that's okay. My number is 818-371-0311. That's 818-371-0311. Think of me as a resource. I'm happy. I really get a lot of gratification out of teaching this stuff and helping people learn it. So.
Fantastic. Well, Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. I appreciate it, and wish you the best in all that you do. And hopefully we'll talk again soon, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com. And we'll see you next Monday morning.